You were never confused about what you wanted. You were confused about whether you were allowed to want it without having to prove why. That's different. That's a completely different wound. And if you don't separate those two things, the wanting and the justifying, you will spend the rest of your life building courtrooms inside your own chest, putting yourself on trial for choices that needed no trial, defending decisions that required no defense, explaining yourself to people who were never interested in understanding you in the first place. That's what this is really about. Not confidence, not communication, not emotional intelligence. It's about the compulsive, anxious, exhausting ritual of over-explanation. The way you reach for words the moment you sense disapproval. The way your nervous system fires before you've even registered the tension in the room. The way you start talking. Faster, longer, softer. Not because you believe what you're saying will land, but because silence feels like a verdict you haven't been given a chance to appeal yet. You've been doing this for years, and you've gotten very, very good at it. You know the architecture of this by now. You know how it starts. Someone asks you why you made a certain choice, or they don't ask, they imply. With that specific tone, that particular silence, that slight hesitation before responding, and something inside you contracts. Something old and animal and quietly terrified. And before you've thought it through, before you've decided whether this person even deserves an explanation, you're already mid-sentence, already building the case, already listing your reasons, like evidence at a sentencing hearing you didn't know you were attending. You explain why you said no. You explain why you needed space. You explain why you left, why you stayed, why you chose what you chose, why you feel how you feel. And somewhere in the middle of all that explaining, something shifts. You can feel it. The person in front of you, or on the other side of that screen, that text thread, that comment section, they're not leaning in, they're not softening, they're waiting. Not for understanding, for ammunition. For the part where you say enough that they can reshape it, redirect it, use it to make this about something other than what it actually was. And you notice. But you keep explaining anyway, because stopping feels like losing, because silence feels like guilt, because somewhere deep in your conditioning, you learned that the person who goes quiet first is the person who did something wrong. That was never true. That was never true, and part of you has always known it. Let's talk about what over-explanation actually is, not what it pretends to be. Not transparency, not vulnerability, not emotional maturity, but what it actually is underneath the language, underneath the earnestness, underneath the desperate hope that this time, if you say it right, they'll finally get it. Over-explanation is a control mechanism. It is the illusion of control dressed in the clothing of openness. When you explain yourself compulsively, you are not being honest. You are trying to manage someone else's perception of you. You are trying to preemptively dismantle their judgment before they've had a chance to form it. You are trying to make yourself safe by making yourself transparent, as if total visibility could protect you from someone else's decision to misunderstand. It cannot. A person who is determined to misread you will misread you regardless of how many words you offer them. The explanation does not change the interpretation. It just gives them more material to work with. And you have been giving them material for a long time. Think about the last time you over-explained. Maybe it was a message you rewrote 4 times before sending, trying to strike the exact tone that was honest but not aggressive, firm but not cold, clear but not defensive. Maybe it was a conversation where you kept adding qualifiers. I don't mean this the wrong way, but, and I know how this sounds. I just want you to understand. As if the right number of softenings would finally make someone accept a boundary they had already decided they weren't going to respect. Maybe it was in the middle of an argument, late at night, screen bright in the dark, typing and deleting, the blue light on your face, the tightness in your chest. The specific desperation of wanting to be understood by someone who has already decided what version of you serves them best. Or maybe it wasn't even a specific person. Maybe it was the way you explain yourself to yourself. The internal courtroom, the way you replay conversations and reformulate what you should have said, or justify what you did say, or rehearse what you'll say if this comes up again. The way you lie awake reconstructing your own choices as if the right argument, the perfect argument, would finally make you feel like you were allowed to have made them. That's the one that does the most damage. Because at least with other people you can eventually stop talking, but you are always in the room with yourself. Here's the first thing you need to understand. You cannot explain your way to respect. You cannot clarify your way to being seen. You cannot soften your way past someone's resentment, or qualify your way through someone's jealousy, or reason your way into the good graces of someone who is not interested in your reasoning. Only in what your reasoning reveals about your weaknesses. Stop trying. Not because you should be cold, not because honesty is overrated, but because the compulsion to explain is not serving the relationship. It is serving your fear, and the fear is lying to you. It keeps telling you that the right words exist, that there is some precise configuration of language that will finally make this person understand, accept, and respect your position. And so you keep searching for those words. You keep refining the explanation. You keep adding context and nuance and emotional texture, layering it, sculpting it, offering it up, and they take what they want from it and leave the rest. They were never reading the whole thing anyway. Here's what happens when you go quiet instead. Not performatively quiet, not passive-aggressive silent treatment quiet where you're screaming in the absence of words. I mean genuinely, calmly, undefensively quiet. I mean the kind of quiet where you simply don't explain. You made a choice. You're at peace with the choice. You don't need to walk anyone through your reasoning in 12 steps. You don't need to issue a statement. You don't need to convert anyone to your position. When you go quiet like that, something reveals itself. The people who respond to your silence with acceptance, who trust you even without the explanation, who give you the dignity of assuming you had your reasons. Those people tell you something. They show you the texture of their respect for you. They show you that the relationship is built on something more solid than your constant performance of justifiability. And the people who respond to your silence with escalation, with pressure, with guilt, with that specific brand of wounded indignation that says, "How dare you not explain yourself to me?" They are showing you something too. They are showing you that what they wanted was never understanding. What they wanted was access, control, the feeling of being the person who gets to decide whether your choices are acceptable. Let them show you. Stop interrupting the reveal. You have confused explanation with intimacy. That's one of the more painful things to sit with. But it needs to be said clearly. You have told yourself that the reason you over-explain is because you value honesty, because you're emotionally open, because you want people to truly know you. And some of that is real, but some of it, the compulsive part, the part that can't let silence stand, the part that rewrites the same message at midnight, that part is not intimacy. That part is fear wearing intimacy's face. Real intimacy does not require you to justify your existence at every turn. Real intimacy is not built on an endless audition. When you are truly known by someone, truly seen, not surveilled, you do not feel the need to explain every dimension of every feeling to keep the relationship alive. There is space. There is trust. There is the quiet understanding that you are a full human being whose interior life does not require external validation to be legitimate. If you are explaining constantly, you are not being intimate. You are being managed, and you are helping with the management. Let me be specific about something because abstraction is easy to dismiss. You know that moment when someone pushes back on a boundary you set? When you say no to something, to the extra work, to the plan you didn't want, to the relationship that was costing you more than it gave, and they don't accept the no, they don't rage, they don't argue. They just look at you a certain way, or they send a certain kind of message, or they use that particular silence that has always made you feel like you've done something terrible. And you feel the pull immediately. The pull to explain, to soften it, to add context, to say, I just think that, or it's not that I don't want to, or I really do care about this, it's just. Watch what happens when you don't. Watch what happens when you hold the no without dressing it in apology, when you let the silence exist, when you don't rush to fill the space with reassurance. They will move in some direction, and the direction they move will tell you everything about whether this relationship can hold the weight of who you actually are. Some people will adjust, will breathe, will respect you in a new and quieter way, now that they understand that your boundaries are not negotiations. And some people will punish you, not loudly maybe, but you'll feel it. The cooling, the withdrawal, the sudden strategic unavailability, the subtle shift in tone that says, if you won't give me access, I will take this away. That is not someone who loved you. That is someone who loved their access to you, and you needed to see the difference. The only reason you hadn't seen it before is that you kept explaining yourself before they had to reveal themselves. Stop protecting people from the consequences of their own behavior. That is what over-explanation does. Every time you rush to smooth the tension, to recontextualize the conflict, to offer more information than you owe, you are stepping in before the natural consequence of their reaction can land. You are managing their discomfort so efficiently that they never have to reckon with what their discomfort actually reveals. What are they actually upset about? Not the thing they're saying. Not the surface complaint. What is underneath that? What does their reaction to your simple human no tell you about their expectations of you, about the role they've decided you should play in their life, about what they believe they are owed? You will never get to find out if you keep talking. Silence is not a weapon here, it's a mirror. And some people cannot stand to look at what they see in it. There's a version of this that plays out digitally too, and it is worth naming because you probably live inside it every day. You've done it online. You felt the pull in a comment section, in a DM, in a group chat. Someone misreads you or challenges you or makes a judgment that feels wrong, and immediately, before you've even decided if this person matters, you're already composing the response, already explaining, already doing the labor of making a stranger understand you correctly. Why? You will never meet this person. Their opinion of you has no weight in your actual life. They are not offering you anything, not love, not respect, not real relationship. They are a notification. They are ambient, static, shaped like a human opinion, and yet something in you scrambles to be understood by them, because it is not about them. It never was. It is about an older wound, an older need. The child or the teenager or the early version of you who learned in a room that mattered, with people who mattered, that silence was dangerous, that being misunderstood was catastrophic, that the way to survive disapproval was to out-explain it. That strategy helped you then, in that room, with those people. It is destroying you now. Let's talk about closure, because this is where so many people get lost for so long. You've chased it. You know you have. The conversation that would finally resolve things. The message that would bring some final understanding. The phone call where they would finally admit what they did, or explain why they pulled away, or give you the words that would let you stop carrying the question. But here's what closure actually is, and what it almost never is. It is almost never given. It is almost always taken. Extracted from the raw material of reality, from your own observation of what happened, from what you are willing to admit you saw even when you didn't want to see it. The explanation you were waiting for from them, They are not withholding it out of cruelty necessarily. Some of them don't have it. Some of them cannot articulate what they did or why, because to do so would require a level of self-awareness they haven't earned and a level of honesty they are not capable of offering. Some of them know exactly what they did and have decided clearly that you do not deserve the dignity of an explanation. Either way, waiting for it is a sentence you are serving for a crime they committed. You are allowed to release yourself without their permission. You don't need them to understand why you're leaving. You don't even need to explain why. The leaving is enough. The decision is complete in itself. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes with this pattern, a bone-level tiredness that sleep doesn't fix. You know it. The feeling of having talked so much and been so transparent and offered so much of your inner life and still feeling profoundly unseen. It's not a failure of communication. That's the cost of performing understanding instead of living it. You have been working so hard to be understood that you forgot to notice whether you were being nourished, whether the people receiving all of your careful explanations were giving you anything in return, whether the relationship had any direction beyond you offering and them consuming. You cannot explain yourself into being loved correctly. If someone does not see your value, adding more words will not create vision they don't have. Let me say something about dignity, because I think this is the word that lives underneath all of this. Dignity is not something you earn by being understood. Dignity is what you carry when you stop needing to be. When you understand that your choices do not require a committee. When you understand that your boundaries do not need to be ratified by the people they inconvenience. When you understand that your silence is not guilt, your privacy is not deception, your withdrawal is not punishment. It is simply the choice of a person who has decided to stop making themselves smaller in order to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. That is not coldness, it is maturity. It is the difference between someone who explains everything because they are afraid of what happens if they don't, and someone who explains what they choose to explain because they have decided this person has earned that transparency. Not everyone has. You have been distributing yourself too freely to too many people who have given you no particular reason for access. Protect what is yours, not out of pride, out of respect for your own interior life, out of the understanding that not every person who is curious about your reasoning deserves to be given it. When you pull back, when you genuinely start to practice this, you will feel the discomfort immediately, because this is not natural for you yet, because your nervous system has been trained to read silence as threat and explanation as safety, because somewhere in the architecture of your anxiety lives the belief that if you are fully known, fully visible, fully explained, you cannot be misrepresented, you cannot be hurt. The transparency is armor, but it's not. Visibility is not protection. Over-explanation is not intimacy. Justifying every choice is not self-defense. It is exposure. And you have been walking around with your chest open, offering the tenderest parts of yourself to people who are treating them carelessly. You are allowed to close that. Not forever. Not for everyone. But you are allowed to require something before you offer the interior, some evidence of safety, some demonstration of care, some indication that this person intends to hold what you give them with the weight it deserves. Here's the quiet revolution that happens when you stop. When you stop over-explaining, when you stop seeking closure from people who can't give it, when you stop justifying your choices to everyone who raises an eyebrow at them, the people around you begin to shift. Not because you've become powerful in some theatrical way, not because silence is a manipulation, but because something real has changed in you, and people can feel the reality of it even when they can't name it. The person who used to exhaust themselves explaining things has developed a quiet that wasn't there before, a stillness, an absence of the usual scrambling. And in that stillness, other people, the ones who are watching, who are always watching, They begin to respond to the actual version of you rather than the one that was constantly performing legibility. Some people are drawn to this. They feel the solidity of it and they move toward it. And some people are threatened by it, because the version of you that needed to explain itself was also the version that could be managed, the version that would eventually cave if they just waited long enough or applied the right pressure, the version they had built their understanding of you around. When you stop being that version, they don't know what to do with you. And their discomfort, that confusion, that recalibration, that moment where they have to actually decide if this relationship works for them without the old dynamic. That is information. Let them process it. Don't rush to comfort them through it. There is a specific moment I want you to imagine. You have made a decision, something that affects your life, your time, your energy. Maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's a career choice. Maybe it's a boundary you set about how you will and will not be spoken to. Maybe it's as small as choosing not to answer a message for 2 days because you needed those 2 days for yourself. And someone close or someone who feels entitled to closeness reacts to your decision, not with acceptance, not with curiosity, with that particular version of pressure that disguises itself as concern. I just don't understand why you do this. Don't you think you should reconsider? I feel like there's something you're not telling me, and you are about to explain. Stop. Look at what's actually happening in this moment. Look past the words. Look at the structure underneath them. Someone is responding to your autonomous choice by requiring access to your reasoning. Someone has decided that your decision is not fully valid until they have reviewed it and found it acceptable. That is not love. That is not support. That is a system of control, often unconscious, often well-intentioned, but a system of control nonetheless. And every time you comply with it, every time you open the file and walk them through the reasoning and soften the edges and add the context and wait anxiously for their verdict, you teach them that this is how it works. You teach them that your choices are subject to their review. You teach yourself the same thing. You cannot afford to keep teaching these lessons. There's a question worth sitting with. Who taught you that you needed permission? Not literally, not out loud, but somewhere in your formation, in the relationships that shaped the template you've been working from ever since. Someone made you feel that your instincts were suspicious, that your needs were excessive, that the right way to exist in relationship with others was to constantly make your interior visible, constantly justify your reactions, constantly perform reasonableness to avoid some consequence that was heavy enough to teach you fear. You've been running that old program in new circumstances for a long time. The circumstances have changed. You are not that child anymore. You are not in that room. You are not dealing with the person who made silence feel dangerous. But your nervous system doesn't know that yet. And so every time someone goes quiet after you set a limit, every time there's tension after you say no, every time you sense disapproval, the old architecture activates. And you explain. It is not weakness. It is an old wound responding to new pain. But it is also something you can choose to interrupt. Not perfectly, not immediately, not without discomfort, but you can, slowly, begin to notice the pull before you respond to it. You can learn to pause in the space between the anxiety and the explanation. You can learn to ask yourself, do I want to share this, or do I feel compelled to? Am I offering this transparency because it serves us, or because I am afraid of what happens if I don't? The question itself begins to change the pattern. People will surprise you when you stop managing their reactions. This is one of the stranger gifts of this shift, one you won't see until you're inside it. When you stop preemptively softening everything, when you stop rushing to make everyone comfortable with your choices before they've even registered them, when you allow your decisions to land without an immediate cushion of justification, people show you who they are more clearly than they ever could before. The ones who needed you small to feel okay with themselves will feel threatened. The ones who see you clearly and respect you wholly will feel something else. something closer to relief, as if your solidness gives them permission for their own. And you will learn more about who is actually in your life in 3 months of quiet than you learned in 3 years of explaining. Let them reveal themselves. You have been talking too much to see them. Walk away from the argument you're about to lose yourself in. Not because you're wrong, because engaging it requires you to become smaller than you are. Because the person on the other side of it has already decided the outcome and needs you to participate in their narrative. Because no amount of correct reasoning delivered at the right volume will change a mind that was never genuinely open. Walk away not in defeat, but in recognition. You have seen what is here. You have seen what this person does with the space where understanding should be. You have seen that they prefer the version of this conflict that makes you the problem, and no explanation you give will threaten that preference. It is too comfortable for them. It has been too comfortable for too long. Your departure from the argument is not a concession. It is the most honest statement you can make. It says, I see what this is. I am not going to feed it. Let this land. The more you explain, the more you participate in the pretense that your choices require permission. Every explanation says quietly underneath it, I believe I owe you this. I believe my decision is incomplete until you've had access to my reasoning. I believe your understanding of me is something I am responsible for producing. None of that is true. None of it has ever been true. And the people who have the most to gain from you believing it have been very invested in keeping you convinced. Stop. Not coldly, not permanently, but selectively and with clear eyes. Choose when you explain. Choose to whom. Choose based not on anxiety but on genuine relationship, on whether this person has shown you through their actions, not their words, that they handle what you offer them with care. And let the ones who can't handle your boundaries show you what they're made of. They will. They always do. There is a quieter life on the other side of this. Not emptier. Quieter. A life where you are not perpetually on trial inside your own head. Where you make a decision and sit with it in the steady knowledge that you weighed it as honestly as you could and acted accordingly. Where when someone reacts badly to your no, you can watch their reaction with curiosity rather than terror, because you are not in the business of managing their feelings about your choices anymore. It will feel strange at first. The anxiety will interpret it as passivity, as giving up, as not caring, because your nervous system has spent so long conflating action with worth, explanation with love, performance with safety. But hold it, stay in it. Feel the difference between the frantic energy of over-explaining and the calm gravity of quiet self-possession. Feel the difference between the exhaustion of constantly defending yourself and the solidity of simply being yourself, unbothered by the need for external ratification. That is not indifference, that is peace, and it is the kind of peace that can only be built inside. Slowly, out of the repeated choice to trust your own perception, to believe your own reasoning, to stand in your own decisions without waiting for someone else to validate them. You are not difficult, you are not too much, you are not failing at communication because you sometimes choose not to explain yourself. You are learning, finally, at whatever age you are, in whatever season of your life this is, that you are a complete person before anyone understands you. That your choices are valid before they are approved, that your silence is not evidence of guilt, that your withholding is not cruelty. It is simply the natural, healthy instinct of someone who has decided they are no longer going to distribute their interior life like a public document, available to anyone who wants to file a complaint. Some things are yours. They were always meant to be yours. You were never obligated to hand them over. The less you explain, the more they reveal. Let that settle into you, not as strategy, not as manipulation, as truth. When you stop doing the exhausting work of managing everyone's interpretation of you, reality gets to speak. The people in your life get to show you, without the soft cushion of your constant justification, what they actually think, what they actually want, what they are actually willing to offer when the dynamic shifts and the power recenters inside you. Some of what they reveal will hurt. You will see that some of the people you worked hardest to be understood by were never really listening. You will see that some of the relationships you defended most carefully were being held together by your anxiety rather than their love. You will see which connections can survive your solidity and which ones required your smallness in order to function. That is painful information. It is also the truest, most essential information you will ever receive, and you cannot receive it while you're still talking. Go quiet, not in resentment, not in performance, in the deep, settled, earned quiet of someone who has finally decided they are enough. Not because everything in their life is resolved, not because they've become invulnerable, not because they no longer need people or connection or warmth, but because they have stopped outsourcing the verdict. You are enough. Not because someone finally understood your explanation perfectly, because you decided it. Quietly, without applause. And you're going to keep deciding it, even on the days when no one validates it, even when the silence is uncomfortable, even when someone mistakes your stillness for weakness and tries to press on it. Let them press. You know what's underneath, and that is the only knowing that matters.